guys, MKBHD here, and these are Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL. They are the brand new pure Android flagships, and they're also the smartest smartphones I've ever used. See, I could have just said, like, these are the best Android phones out there, but that's debatable right now. But what isn't debatable is how smart they are. So this is what that means, and this is everything you need to know. So the new design on the outside, I'm a pretty big fan of it, especially for the way I use phones. I mostly use the Pixel 2 XL during my testing, but everything I'm saying will apply to both phones unless I say otherwise. So you can see the new design versus the old Pixel. It's pretty recognizable with that glass window up top, but this year it's a bit cleaned up and it's refined. The glass on the XL kind of flows into the sides more and then around the back with that shape, but the regular Pixel 2 is definitely a bit more boxy. And honestly, the biggest difference between the two is around the front. The smaller phone's bezels are, of course, way bigger, so while the screen is actually a full inch smaller, the phone itself is almost the same footprint. But both phones do have those full front-facing stereo speakers that sound really good, and it's super rare to see this in a smartphone, but it makes everything better. Music is louder, clearer, watching videos is better, gaming is better, everything benefits from better audio, so that's great to see. And just the texture on this back, it kind of feels like a sort of a powder coating with this subtle grain. It's pretty unique. The Panda black and white version of this phone actually has a slightly smoother feeling back. Yes, it actually does feel different in the hand, but same idea. It's a plastic coating over the top of a metal body. But yeah, the aluminum with the soft touch coating on the back means two things. One, no wireless charging. That doesn't work through metal. But two, it's actually like, it's this really nice, unique feel in the hand. I have a feeling this texture is going to wear to being like smooth eventually if you use a phone for a long time. But so far so good. And it's also actually kind of light. Like a lot of phones have the full glass backs now. Glass is pretty heavy. As a result, this by contrast is pretty lightweight. But just all around, a decent collection of hardware choices for this phone. Stereo front-facing speakers, USB-C with fast charging at the bottom, one of the fastest fingerprint readers I've ever seen on any phone, on the back in the middle where it belongs, some nice, really clicky buttons on the side of this phone, and just overall a pretty clean look. But it's not perfect. No headphone jack, obviously, so yes, 1 year after they make fun of it, we get this phone that also doesn't have the headphone jack, and there's no headphones included in the box, as you saw from the unboxing video. And the other minor thing is it's IP67 water and dust resistant, technically slightly less than the IP68 of Samsung and Apple flagships, but still honestly pretty great. Technically will survive 1 meter of water for 30 straight minutes, so that's good enough to not really worry about using it in the rain or surviving a quick plunge in water. That's smart. One thing they've added to the Pixel 2 is the squeeze feature. It's now pressure sensitive on the sides, just like that HTC U Ultra was, so you can now squeeze to activate Google Assistant. It sounds pretty corny, but I actually really like it. This might be the most underrated feature for me of this new phone. You can remap it with a third-party app as of right now, and it isn't blocked, but officially Google just wants us to activate Assistant, and it's essentially a way to get people to start using Assistant more. I didn't think the squeeze would make any difference to me, but here's the thing. It's faster than any way we've previously had to trigger the Assistant. Before I would say, okay Google, and then wait for it to wake up, and then use the Assistant. Or what you could also do was long press home, wait a second, then it's triggered. But now just squeezing the phone is actually the fastest way we've had to just immediately fire it up and start using it. So I found myself squeezing the phone and just asking it stuff all the time, basically exactly what Google wants. It ramped up my usage of Google Assistant for simple things like Googling something or firing up navigation somewhere, checking the weather, checking my calendar, playing music. You know, it's a small change, but it got me using the ever-improving Assistant a lot more. You will definitely accidentally trigger it a lot, though. Sometimes just when you're picking up the phone off a table or when you're taking it out of your pocket, you might just grab it a little too hard and you trigger the Assistant. But it's quick to get rid of, so it wasn't too annoying. Plus, there are way more nuanced levels of pressure sensitivity for the Active Edge now, so you can dial it up if you trigger too much or dial it down if you feel like you want to have to squeeze harder. That's smart. And the theme persists through pretty much all of the entire software experience. Performance is of course great, as you would expect from a Pixel. It's Android 8.0 Oreo optimized for this hardware, and so everything's been running pretty smoothly since day one with no hiccups. And really this experience is all about the subtle improvements kind of sprinkled throughout Android to make it better where it counts. It's not trying to have all the bells and whistles and tons of crazy features you might see in a Samsung or LG skin. But a lot of what you see here is changed literally just to make the daily experience of using the phone better. There's a redesigned settings app, which is a bit cleaner and it's easier to navigate and find any features you're interested in. The multi-window is faster to get into because it's just long pressing the multitasking button now, and that surfaces all the apps compatible. Picture-in-picture mode, which works with the built-in YouTube app, is super clean. Kind of works the same way it would on a tablet. You hit home and the window shrinks down and you can move it anywhere you want and keep doing other stuff in the background. Notifications also have different sizes up top, so smaller notifications for stuff that's ongoing are less important, and bigger ones are for newer or more important stuff. And notification dots on the app icons on the home screen are also awesome. You can read through and manipulate notifications from here too. Also, if you're listening to a music app, pretty much any of them, the notification for that app changes color based on the album art of what you're listening to, which is dope. And the always-on display comes to these phones, so you get that time and notification information at a glance all the time. And there's a new feature that you can turn on called Now Playing. There's been a lot of hype for this. You can turn on the always-on ambient mics, and if there's a song playing in the background, it'll tell you the name of that song and give you a link to buy it or listen to it on Spotify or YouTube. It works surprisingly well. It has an offline database, so if you're in airplane mode, it still works, confirmed. It doesn't require sending any information to the cloud. That's smart. The launcher will automatically give your app drawer a light background if you have a light wallpaper, or a dark background if you have a dark wallpaper. And notice the G in the Google search bar also changes to stay visible based on your wallpaper. That's really smart. And Google Lens is built in now, exclusive to Pixels. It's definitely still early for it, but it's kind of doing what Google Goggles used to do, basically a search based on image recognition. So take a picture of something, ideally with text in it, and then in the gallery, press the lens button, and it'll do its best to identify what you took a picture of and give you a relevant link. So maybe a purchase link to a book if you take a picture of the cover, or a location in Google Maps if you take a picture of a landmark, stuff like that. It doesn't work half the time, but when it does, it's really cool. So yeah, there's plenty of little nuggets in the software here that I love, and I have a whole video on the best features, of course, of Android 8.0 Oreo, and all of that still applies. And the cherry on top is great battery life, as you'd probably expect from a new stock Android phone with an OLED display. My typical long day of use will give me 4 hours of screen on time. This phone, I'm averaging closer to 5 hours of screen on time. I had one day with like 7.5 hours, and I never went below 4.5. So translation, really good battery. But let's talk about that OLED display, shall we? A lot of other parts of the hardware of this phone have gotten praise and rave reviews. The display, not so much. Like that's a lot of bad press for one part of one phone. Is it as bad as they say? So okay, with a lot of phones that have come out, there have been issues with 6-inch 2880 by 1440 P OLED display, and at first glance, it's pretty good. It's sharp, it's colorful, it's an OLED display, so blacks are pitch black. It gets decently bright, has those curved edges. It looks pretty clean, you know? But obviously with all this press, there are some different stories being told. So here's my breakdown. On this Pixel 2 XL, there are two main observable issues: the blue shift and muted colors. One of these is hardware, one of these is software. The blue shift is pretty obvious. I've talked about viewing angles on phone reviews in the past. If you tilt the Pixel 2 display enough off-axis, you will start to see all the colors shift towards blue hues from the top to bottom. It's easy to see when you're looking for it, but to me it's actually pretty minor because pretty much all the time I'm using the phone, I'm using it on axis. But again, this is something I did notice, so I'm doing my best to show it to you. That is a hardware issue. There's nothing you can do about it. That's just the way it is. It's not a deal breaker to most people, to be honest. But the other thing, which I think is actually a bit more noticeable, is the colors. The simplest way to explain it is basically, for whatever reason, Google decided on Oreo, on the Pixel 2 XL, they will show just sRGB, which is a certain range of colors. The display panel itself, though, is capable of showing the entire P3 color gamut, which is a wider range of colors. And most phones now are showing that wider range of colors. They all have P3 displays. So the effect of Google's decision is it makes the colors look more dull or more toned down than we're used to. The original choice was for this to look more accurate, more natural, and more professional, which is why they included a vivid color mode in the settings, but this only increases saturation and vividness by 10%, so it basically does almost nothing. Here, comparing it to the Note 8 display, you can see it shows up mostly in the extreme colors, but it's all the way across the board, like the reds, the oranges, the high values. The Note 8 display is more saturated and is showing a wider range of colors. Now the weird part, and this is according to a Reddit explainer that I'll link below if you want to read the whole thing, the weird part is that developers can flip a switch to enable showing wide color gamut in their apps, but pretty much zero apps do that. None of Google's apps on this phone do that either. The only place you will find that is in the Camera Viewfinder app and Firefox, interestingly enough. If you grab Firefox from the Play Store, it will show all the P3 color gamut on this display. So in Chrome, on the Pixel 2, this looks like an entirely solid image, but that same exact image file in Firefox shows that it's clearly not. You're missing out on those colors. And just showing this page demonstrating the difference in color spaces, again in Chrome or any other browser, doesn't help much, but showing it in Firefox shows how much you're missing. So image processing has made this the best photo capturing smartphone, period. That's hands down, no contest to me. It's so good. The camera app itself is pretty basic, like it usually is with stock Android. There is no Pro mode, no manual mode. There's only some pretty minor adjustments you can make with exposure compensation, but for the most part, you're just tapping and shooting in auto. And when you do that, this camera does an incredible job. Sharpness, on point. Contrast, on point. Color accuracy, on point. Dynamic range, on point. Autofocus, on point. Bokeh, on point. Everything that can be good about a camera is really good about the Pixel 2's camera, and it has the results to show it. I've loved taking and sharing photos from this thing over the past couple weeks. It's been the most frequent, "That's a nice photo, what did you take this on?" comment maker. It deserves all the praise it's been getting, and it will continue to get that. Now you may have noticed, there's only one lens. The iPhone needs two lenses to do portrait mode. How is this doing portrait mode? So Google's used a sensor here with what's called split pixels, which allows Google software to measure the difference in depth using a difference in microns between the split pixels instead of having two separate cameras. So they can do all of that depth computation and mapping for portrait mode using one camera. And a lot of times it does it better than with two.